Welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on the show today is Adam Frese, who is a forester for the Tuolumne Calaveras unit of CAL FIRE. Adam, welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
Really great to have you on the show. I'm so excited to talk about forestry with you, especially after the Butte Fire has devastated so much of Calaveras County. I hope that we can help educate people about the importance of forestry and forest management, and what we can do to hopefully maybe prevent some of these larger fires in the future if we make wise decisions. And you're the expert on this stuff, so really, really glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
You betcha. So before we get into some of those topics, you haven't been on the show before, so I was hoping you could tell our viewers a little bit about where you grew up and how your life has brought you to your current position.
All right. I grew up in Tuolumne County, and I was fortunate at an early age. I kind of had some different friends and neighbors that were interested in forestry or had forestry careers that kind of mentored me along a little bit. And I had a third grade teacher that her husband worked for Forest Service, and they'd take me backpacking every summer. So, I got an interest in what the type of work he was doing. I had other friends in the Forest Service that would take me out calling for spotted owls at night, that type of thing, and friends that were in the timber industry that were logging. So I kind of developed an interest in forestry, and was fortunate enough to be able to go to school in Montana. I graduated from University of Montana. Cool. And then ended up working for Fiberboard in Standard as an intern, and worked there for a couple of seasons, and then for a small private forestry company, H&W, for about 3 years before I was able to get on with CAL FIRE.
And what was your first kind of in with CAL FIRE?
My first job with CAL FIRE was at the Magalia Reforestation Center in Butte County, which was about a 15-acre farm where we grew seedlings to be planted all over the state. So it was a really interesting job. I didn't have any nursery experience when I got the job, but I ended up learning a lot. And I until I worked there, I'd planted trees before, but I really didn't have an idea of how much work went into growing them. So it was a really good experience.
So I'm just curious about that, because I didn't know that there were these big farms that CAL FIRE was involved with, but did you have a big mix of different conifer varieties? Or?
We did, and there were several private nurseries throughout the state and the country, but that nursery really specialized. There was a nursery that we used to have three, one in Ben Lomond, one in Davis, the L.A. Moran nursery, and then the one in Magalia. And the one in Magalia really specialized in growing kind of smaller lots of trees for small landowners, especially after fires like the Butte Fire. So they would, there'd be an opportunity for people to purchase seedlings in kind of smaller lots. If you were, had 5 or 10 or 20 acres and didn't need to purchase a huge amount of trees, just enough to reforest kind of the smaller parcels.
So it wouldn't just be the conifers, were there also like oaks and hardwoods and for pretty much all elevations then?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So we grew a variety of species from a variety of elevations, and the state's broken down into different seed zones. So you always want to plant trees from the same seed zone and within about 1,000-foot similar elevation. So we were mostly conifers, but the nursery in Davis grew a lot of hardwoods as well.
Okay. So, and we'll talk about this later in the show, but the Butte Fire, there may be opportunities for those residents to partner with CAL FIRE and get some of their costs met in order to reforest some of these areas?
That's correct. We do. Last week I just received word that we do have some funding for our CFIP program. It's the California Forest Improvement Program, and what it is, it's a Costshare program. Way back the state recognized that productive timberland is an important resource in the state. So this Costshare program is a mechanism for people to reforest after fires, or even not after fires, even if they have brush land that they want to convert to timber. And the state, there needs to be a management plan, and the state generally reimburses 90% or 90 cents on the dollar for a management plan that's prepared by a forester. And then for different practices such as planting, herbicide spraying, site preparation, those types of things, it's typically 75%. And so we do have funding for that, and we'll be accepting applications.
Wow, that's a huge asset, because I mean, I know if I had lost my property and home, to a really hot part of the fire where there's nothing left, it's kind of a daunting task to think about how can I bring this back to a productive property again.
Right. So that's, yeah, the CFIP program is a really good mechanism for that, and I'm excited that we have funding.
How old are the trees that generally would go in from the nursery into the actually being planted?
So there's two types of trees that are typically planted. There's plugs, they're called, which are grown in containers, and then bare root, which are just grown in the seed beds and lifted. So bare root trees are usually 2 years older. They're called 2.0. Okay. And then the plugs are typically 1 year old.
And you kind of can mix those up, or can you plant one or the other?
You can plant one or the other, or a combination. And one of the advantages to the bare root is they're larger, and if there's competition, the larger tree can sometimes outcompete. The benefit of plugs is usually that they're kind of in a soil medium, so there's less chance of the roots drying out, that type of thing. So there's kind of benefits to both.
When everything's been burned, things come back vigorously, it seems like, once the water comes back. How do you give the trees a chance to be successful without them getting choked out by the other natives or non-native invasives? So
there's a couple things. One of the things that's been really successful is contour ripping with like a dozer with rippers to contour, and that has several benefits. One is it breaks up. A lot of times when fires burn really hot, there's it's called a hydrophobic layer on the soil, where it gets kind of a crusty surface on it due to the temperature, where the water beads up and doesn't penetrate. So one of the benefits to the contour ripping, or even any disturbance, is it breaks up that hydrophobic layer. But by contour ripping and creating that furrow, it cuts down on, it breaks up the hydrophobic layer. It cuts down on erosion by roughening the surface of the ground, and then that furrow holds moisture, so it increases the survivability of the tree, and it helps it compete. But then it also breaks up. It can also help reduce competition as well. But one of the main ones is an herbicide treatment to just get the tree started and get them up above the layer of a competing brush. A lot of the species we have here are sprouts. Chamise and different species that are going to, live oak, they're going to sprout, as you know, they're going to sprout really quickly and be significant competition for the trees. And grass is a big competition too. Right. So right. Yeah, and an herbicide treatment, I know herbicides can be controversial, but it can give the trees a good head start.
So it's possible that even if you weren't a big fan of herbicides, you could use it minimally in the beginning and give them that head start that they might need, and then others might continue if they really wanted to give them an additional head start?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Other ways, people can, on a smaller scale, can use mulch, or there's mats that you can put down to eliminate the growth in the immediate area of the tree. Okay. But cost-wise and effectiveness-wise, probably herbicide is probably one of the most effective. Now,
would CAL FIRE be involved in the herbicide, or would that be on the landowner to do that?
Through the CFIP program, that's a practice that we would reimburse for. Okay. But some of the things that there does have to be a forester involved with oversight, and also a recommendation from a pest control advisor.
Got it.
So to make sure that it's in prescription and all the laws are being abided by.
Got it. So what is forestry? Yeah, I think we all hear that term and we think we know what it means, but if you're a forester, what do you need to know about, and what are you doing?
Well, California is kind of unique, where in California to practice forestry, you actually have to have a license. So foresters are licensed. They have to qualify to take the test. You have to spend you have to have 7 years experience, and your school counts as 4 if you have a degree in forestry or some natural resources biology. It'll count for 4. So that's kind of unique to California. So a lot of what private foresters do in California is write timber harvest plans. So before timber can be harvested in the state, a registered professional forester prepares a timber harvesting plan, and there's a lot that goes into it. Foresters have to be kind of an expert in a lot of different fields. Silviculture, archaeology is a big one, wildlife management, road construction, crossing design. There's a lot that they have to kind of be an expert in a lot of different fields. And then when these plans, when they come to CAL FIRE, they're reviewed by a forester, and then other agencies also take part in the review process. There's California Fish and Wildlife, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and I'm missing one, California Geological Survey, our state geologists that typically are involved in the review process. And then state parks can be if it's close to one of the state parks. So there's a lot of, before timber's harvested in this state, there's a lot of planning and thought that goes into it and the works. And then the logging is actually done by a licensed timber operator. So in California, there's a lot of regulations that come into play so that it's a really planned out, and regulated process.
So I'm Sierra Pacific Industries, SPI.
Okay.
And I think one of the largest, if not the largest, private landowner in the state, and I have a lot of timber. I can't just go out there and cut timber however, whenever I want. I need to have a forester prepare a plan for these different areas,
Yes.
and then it has to be reviewed by people like you,
Yes.
and then the other people you mentioned?
Yes, it goes, those plans are submitted to our region office down in Fresno, where they're reviewed by another RPF and the agencies that I mentioned. And then it comes to the field, so one of our field foresters. And in this unit, I'm the unit forester, and then each county has an area forester that typically would do those pre-harvest inspections. So they'd set up an inspection on the ground with, with the other agencies that wish to participate, and the forester who wrote the plan, and the landowner, and go out and look at things on the ground and see if there needs to be any changes. And then it goes back for another review after that process is complete before approval.
How long would like an average plan take to kind of get through the hurdles?
It should take about 45 days, but it's often much longer than that with different delays and changes that are required. And so we try our best to meet all the time frames and get things done quickly, but it often takes with public comment and different things, and recirculation, if there's any significant changes, it often takes longer than that 45 days.
Can you just touch on different ways of harvesting timber? The one you always hear about is clear cutting, and then there's also maybe like selective harvests and things of that nature. As a forester, if you look at these different methods, what are your feelings on whether one's better than the other, or if they're all okay?
Well, there's basically two systems. There's uneven aged and even aged. And uneven aged, an example that would be like single tree selection or group selection, where we're harvesting trees in groups less than 2.5 acres in size. And then even ages would be where a stand is basically a single age, or it's being regenerated, so you grow it up in a single age. So clear cutting would be an example of that. Seed tree or shelterwood removal. Or seed step, where you're leaving, you might have a stand where you want to leave some really superior trees and have them spaced out in a real open park-like setting, and then those trees seed in. In the Sierras in the western United States, the ground really thrives on disturbance. So if you leave some scattered trees and that ground's churned up from logging or disturbed, or even from a fire, those trees will seed in like crazy, and you'll have a really vigorous crop of trees growing up under it. So it would be an example of an even age method. So and then there's intermediate treatments as well, such as commercial thinning, where you have an even age stand that's growing up of, like, say, young pine, and you thin it out. It's still even age, but you're increasing the space in between. So it's not really an uneven age treatment like selection, where you're just kind of picking trees here and there. It's you're really spacing the stand out, but it's still not really mature yet. So that would be an intermediate treatment. And another intermediate treatment that we see quite a bit now is a fuel break, where in strategic areas where the stand's being pretty much the understory removed, and to create an open and park-like stand where that would be resistant to a stand replacing fire.
And I see that type of treatment, I want to say, like along parts of Highway 4.
Yes.
Where it's really cleaned out and it looks more like a park-like setting, but there's still a lot of large and medium trees that have been left there.
And that's a condition that really is a more natural condition. I know those really stand out, like especially along the Highway 4 corridor, how it's open and park-like. There's really not much vegetation in the understory. And that's really how our forests are supposed to look.
Well, I'm so fascinated by that. So take me back to what did California look like prior to the Spanish kind of getting involved here, when we maybe had the Native Americans who actually did manage forests to a certain extent, what did California look like back then?
So the stands were very open and park-like, large, old-growth, a lot of pine. Not so much the shade-tolerant trees like the white fir and cedar, but it was definitely more favored to pine, which is a shade-intolerant, and if there would be known as a climax species. So if things were left on their own over a long period of time, that would be the species that you'd end up with. Heavy to pine, and open and park-like, and definitely between lightning and ignition sources from Native Americans, the mean fire return interval was 7 to 14 years. Wow. And so fires were typically burning, all the time, and keeping those conditions where it was low. It was frequent duration, but really low intensity fires. So, and then as you know, and there was also small even age aggregations of trees where if, a pocket of trees died, a new one would take its place. But you didn't have, where now the species has really shifted away from pine and more towards shade-tolerant trees like the white fir and cedar, which are not as, pine's really resistant to fire. It has thick bark, and it's self-pruning. So if you look at old-growth pine trees, you'll notice that they're, the first couple of logs in that tree have no limbs. So those limbs get shaded out, they die and fall off. And that's a mechanism that helps them survive fires because it reduces that ladder fuel. And then they also have really thick, it's called ablative bark, that peels off. So as the fire burns, that bark warms up and curls off and falls off, exposing a cool surface, really similar to like the space shuttle when it lands with the tiles. It uses the similar principle to stay cool.
Oh my gosh. So
they're really, pine is really, would thrive in those historic conditions.
So the lightning has been starting fires even before humans were around, and then humans maybe lit a few more fires, but there were a lot of fires. It was burning often, but it was this low intensity. So
yes.
that is truly the natural state of forest.
Yes.
Is like you said, open park-like, bigger trees that can resist fire.
Yes.
What happened when man got involved, and what was the result?
So a couple things happened. Actually, there's several things that happened. One was obviously fire suppression. We got really good at putting fires out, and then also historic logging practices where the large sugar pine and pine that were really high value were harvested, and those shade tolerant species, the fir and cedar, grew up to take their place. And then so the combination of those two things really over the last 100 years have created really overstocked stands that are not in a natural conditions, both species composition wise and density wise. So and you also have the ladder fuels that are in between, like this. You have the surface fuels on the ground, and then you have all the brush and small trees that are growing, suppressed intermediate trees that would carry a flame. And that open and park-like stand, the duff and surface fuels are going to burn, but flame lengths are going to be probably less than 4 feet, and really have nowhere to go. I mean, they might climb up the trees a little bit, but it's not really going to hurt anything. But now you have this accumulation of really dense surface fuels and then ladder fuels that are going to carry that fire right up into the crowns, and then you have these catastrophic, stand replacing fires where the crowns and everything are burning.
And then you lose everything.
You lose the entire stand. Yeah, they just can't withstand that amount of fire.
So really, it would be fair to say that the condition of the forest today is completely man-created and it's unnatural.
Very much unnatural.
And you pair these thick, dense forests with 4 years of consecutive extreme drought, and we have a very, very dangerous, volatile situation in many of our forests. Yes.
Yeah. Besides the 80 to 100 years of unnatural growth and overcrowding, now you couple that with four years of drought, and then during these last 4 years of drought, especially we've seen it the last year, the bark beetles have a really easy target. The bark beetles are a natural part of the system, and they're always there, but the tree's main defense against bark beetles is to be able to pitch them out. So as the bark beetles bore into the trees, the tree's natural defense is to produce pitch and, push that bark beetle out. But there's there's just no moisture. I've gone and looked at several trees at houses where the crown's fading, and there's not even any pitch coming out. It's just frass or the sawdust from the beetle coming out because the tree has no resources to fight it off. So we're seeing, it's not quite as bad in Calaveras County. In Tuolumne County, we're seeing some pretty significant mortality, especially in the pine trees in the lower elevations and on south-facing slopes, but it's not limited to that. And there are pockets in Calaveras County that are getting bad too. But the further south you go in the state, Mariposa, Madera, and Fresno County are getting hit really hard. And I expect this to, the bark beetle infestation to continue until, conditions change.
So when these trees get weakened, they're easy targets. And then is it true that by the time you see the top of a tree dying, it's too late to save it? It's already gone at that point?
Yeah, pretty much, especially in the conditions that we have now.
Okay.
Maybe sometimes you can see trees, especially there's really three primary beetles that are attacking the pine trees right now. There's the red turpentine beetle, which is it kind of attacks the base of the tree, and that's where you see their big, really red globs of pitch at the base. And those typically don't kill the tree. Then you have the Ips beetle, or the pine engraver, that usually attacks from the top down. And they usually attack the smaller stems, which is the top down, or trees and plantations. And then the main one is the western pine beetle, which is kind of attacks the middle of the crown. A lot of the trees that I've looked at that are dead and on the ground, if you peel the bark back, you can see evidence of all three. They each have unique galleries that they leave. The beetles bore into the trees, then they lay eggs, and the larva bores around in the cambium between the wood and the bark, and then they emerge as adults and take off. So they leave distinct galleries, they're called, as they bore around. So yeah, you can find evidence of all three.
Should people be doing anything about this, or do you have any advice for what to do about these guys?
Well, getting back to your last question about the tip of the tree.
Oh yeah.
So because they kind of go together. You're right. By the time the tree turns brown, the beetles are long gone.
Okay.
But if you can catch them while the top's just starting to fade or the crown's just starting to turn, oftentimes the beetles are still there. So one of the things people can do is to be vigilant and watch their trees for sign of attack and remove them as soon as possible. The beetles need live material to feed in and whatnot, and then they radiate out from there. So removing that stem with the beetles in it, when they radiate out from that stem, that they kind of go exponentially, with each attack. So by interrupting that, by removing that stem, treating the logging slash, the green slash, as brood material for them, you can either chip it or lop it up, scatter it so it gets exposed to solar radiation and dries out quick. So it's not suitable material. That's a big thing people can do to help.
Okay.
Is just remove them as soon as possible. And I know I've been getting a lot of calls from people about can we pay for that, because tree removal is really expensive. Mm-hmm. And right now there's no mechanism for us to provide any relief as far as the cost. Our foresters go out, they're able to make service calls and provide professional advice, that type of thing. And we have information to hand out to the public, and our forest pest specialists are available to come out and assist us at the unit level. But yeah, one of the biggest things the public can do to help is take responsibility for the trees on their own property and try to mitigate it as best they can.
And then if the trees are still doing okay and haven't died yet, if people give the ones they care most about a little water at the drip line, would that help them create pitch to push the beetles
deep
out?
watering is something that can help. It's recommended. It's definitely recommended that it's it's not something you do daily, but periodically, and just make sure it's done for long enough to penetrate down to the roots. Sometimes if you just do frequent shallow watering, it can lead to root disease and that type of thing.
Got it.
But I know watering is tough, under the current
Conservation.
Water's in short supply.
Yeah.
There are other things, you know, and I'm not a pest control advisor, so I can't give people advice on spraying and different things, but there are chemical treatments that are available, and there's also pheromones. And some of the I do have information for the public that they can do. On our website and things, it provides links to people they can do further research on different pheromones. Basically, bark beetles put out these pheromones or chemical attractants to lure other beetles, or bring other beetles to a tree. And there's also pheromones that repel beetles, and so there's different pheromones people can use to put on the trees to repel beetles. And people I've talked to that have used them have been really happy. So we can definitely provide people with information on where they can do further research or get more information on that.
So we just have a couple minutes here. I wanted to end with, what do we need to do to get a handle on the forest conditions and limit the danger of fire?
I think one of the main things, and as a forester, my profession has done a pretty poor job of educating people on what healthy conditions are. I think people see the real thick, dense stands, and most people in the public think that that's the natural condition. And like the conditions you pointed out along the Highway 4 corridor, that's really what natural conditions should be. So I think as foresters, I think we need to do a better job educating the public on what healthy forests are. And then, I just encourage people who own, property, even small lots, to, kind of recreate those historic conditions, because it's healthier for the trees, and then they're definitely going to produce forest stands that are more resistant to catastrophic wildfires.
Oh, absolutely. I know that there are a bunch of resources on your website, and you have handouts that you can give, and so people can really take advantage of what you have to offer there.
Yes, people can give me a call. I work out of the San Andreas office. My number is 754-2706. And also we have area foresters in Calaveras and Tuolumne County that they can contact. And yeah, we can be happy to make service calls or provide them information where they could do their own research.
And just the final thing, can we get this under control? Can we reshape our forests? Do you believe it's possible?
I do believe it's possible. One thing to keep in mind is forests are not a static thing. They're always changing. And so I know you look at these stands and there's a lot of orange out there from dead trees, but there are also green trees in there that are going to reseed. And our western forests are really resilient to disturbance. So I do think we're going to get through this bark beetle problem and drought problem that we're seeing. And then I also think that I think that restoring our forest to a more natural condition is definitely something that Californians can achieve.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.